One thing I've noticed with the social justice Christian movement, at least especially with their interactions on social media, is that very often these people will tend to take the moral low road. Oftentimes you'll get advice, take the high road, that kind of thing. And that's generally good advice for two reasons. One, it's just the right thing to do, to sort of give a lot of grace and be very gracious in your speech. That's a biblical, godly thing to do. But also the second thing is, this is also biblical, is that it tends to heap burning coals on people's heads. It really makes people angry when you take the high road. But this is a tendency for Christians in general, not just social warriors. So I think we all should take a good look in the mirror when we're interacting on social media. But there is a tendency to sort of assume the worst about your opponents and really, in a very backhanded kind of way, sort of insult them. And this is what I mean by taking the low road. And so my advice to you, if you're against social justice warriors, is to not respond in kind. And let me show you what I mean. That I've been seeing a few of these, and then this is the tweet that actually made me want to do this video. But I have some other examples as well. This tweet is from Dr. Eric Mason, and here's what he says. He says, "Anything for the glory of Christ that will change the world will always have significant demonic opposition. Never forget Ephesians 6 in your kingdom endeavors. Work hard and pray even harder by faith. Put on the full armor and fight. Expect God to move mountains. #woke church." Now, you can take this a few different ways. He's saying that opposition to Christ anything that Christ is doing to change the world will always have demonic opposition. And I think that that's actually correct. But the problem is here, he hashtags this woke church, which I'm going to interpret as basically saying that opposition to the woke church's endeavors and their goals is demonic. And so I guess I would be a demonized person, according to Dr. Eric Mason. Now, you might say, well, hey, Adam, you're reading into that. And I'll admit, he doesn't outright say that. But hashtagging it woke church really does send a signal. It's a signal that essentially, if you're not woke, then you're demonic opposition. I would be more willing to give him the benefit of the doubt if he didn't say this a few days earlier. This is, again, Dr. Eric Mason. "We need modern-day ecumenical council on race and justice. We need canons and synods and creeds on this. Come to Philly and we can call it the Council of Philadelphia. Limit it to 300 key men and women, pastors and scholarly secretaries. Rebuke the heretics and affirm the sound." You see, this is, he wants to make it official. This is Dr. Eric Mason saying, well, if you're not woke, I want it to make it official with a modern-day ecumenical council that you're a heretic. I want you rebuked. And so putting these tweets together, it's not a far-fetched thing for me to interpret opposition to woke church. That's demonic. So what I'm doing right now, this is demonic. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the moral low road. There's lots of ways to do this. Here's a tweet that I saw from Kyle J. Howard, where he basically calls people like me racist. He says, "Stalking black people's social media accounts, misrepresenting what they say to discredit, calling black people who advocate for justice words rooted in segregationism, many times buzzwords like Marxist and Gnostic are just philosophical ways to whisper the N-word." Again, it would be much easier to interpret this charitably if he didn't talk about how, if you just use Marxist, then you're just using the N-word. That's a way to call a person like me racist. Again, taking the moral low road, assuming the worst. Here's another one. This is also Kyle J. Howard talking about how opposition tends to be ignorant. Here he says, "I just require humility. If a white person is making statements about race with no knowledge of the issue, they are speaking as a fool. Therefore, I would not value what they say. I think such people should be humble and admit ignorance and seek to learn. That's wisdom." So, in general, he assumes that white people are speaking ignorantly on this topic. Again, that's the moral low road. Now, of course, Kyle J. Howard mentions the word fools in this, and we all, of course, remember this famous clip from Matt Chandler.
Again, I'm not talking about fools. 300 fools left when we first broached the subject. And there wasn't any lament in our elder room about that, other than the normal lament that you lament concerning a fool.
Again, that's the moral low road. Matt Chandler is taking the low road. This one was the most disappointing one, I thought, and it's from a person that I, in general, respect. It's from Pastor Ray Ortland, and here's what he says. He says, Moses renounced his social privilege, choosing to be mistreated with God's people. He didn't just decry his privilege, he crossed the line and left it behind, identifying with outsiders, and the Bible calls that saving faith. Now, strictly speaking, that is true. Moses did renounce his social privilege, but it's not the renouncing of the social privilege that's saving faith. Lots of people can renounce their privilege. I see this all the time in the liberal and the secular media. They renounce their social white privilege and all this stuff, and that's not saving faith. You see what I mean? These are loaded terms. You can't just tweet something out like that. It's very confusing, and I would want to interpret this in a very gracious way, but he doesn't really leave me much choice because he talks all the time on his Twitter feed about privilege and things like this. And so this tweet seems to be saying that renouncing your social privilege, that's saving faith in and of itself. That's a misunderstanding of the Moses story. And that actually, we'll come back to that in another video. That's a very popular story to misunderstand and to misapply. But you see, this is what I'm talking about. Ray Ortlund, Matt Chandler, Kyle Howard, and Dr. Eric Mason, they are taking the low road. They're making it seem as though if you're against them, you stand against these things, then you're almost barely even a Christian. In fact, some of them say, well, you're demonic and you should be called a heretic. That's very explicit. That's explicitly saying you're not a Christian. And so that's the moral low road. And I know it's tempting to take that moral low road, but here is a clip that will show you why you should not do that.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground! You underestimate my power! Don't try it!
You see, you got to take the high ground. The high ground is how you win. Look, I know these people are saying that you're not Christians. I know that some of them are putting your faith in question if you do certain things. You know, if you don't renounce your social privilege, well, do you even have saving faith? I don't know. I mean, you know, if you're not woke, are you demonized? Again, this is rhetoric coming from the other side of this, and I know it's tempting to respond in kind and to call them heretics. I say don't do it. You know, it'd be very easy to do the same thing in reverse, and that's why it's so tempting. I could easily say that the opposition to conservative biblical justice is demonic, and I could just say that all of the woke church people are demonic opposition. It's very easy to do that without demonstrating anything biblically. It might be red meat for your base, but it's not helpful. It's not gracious, and really it just has no place in the pastor's mouth. The Bible doesn't let us call someone a heretic just because they disagree with us on certain topics. There are very few topics that we can say, well, that definitively is a non-Christian position. You know, denying the deity of Christ, not believing in the Trinity, denying justification by faith alone. There are very few things. There's a few others as well. And that's not to say these are optional beliefs, like having the correct view of justice and biblical justice is an important fundamental. It's required for a Christian, but just because we disagree on that does not mean your sins aren't covered by Christ. I think Christ covers sins, even poor theology, even poor views of justice, even wrong views in your ministries. God covers that thing. So I would suggest taking the high ground like Obi-Wan Kenobi, because you know what? The low ground, let them do what they want to do. Let them have the councils and creeds and all that stuff. They'll have to answer to God for that. You have to answer to God for how you treat these brothers. And so I would recommend the high ground. Hope this is helpful. God bless.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground! You underestimate my power! Don't try it!